So let us jump into it. My name is Lise Sustman Allen. I have a master's in psychology from Copenhagen University, and my daily work is here at Master International, where I am head of psychology. For the last 15 years, I've been working with HR from a psychological perspective, working with leadership development, coaching, recruitment, and now I have found a really nerdy niche here at Master International, working with test and solutions. I put in my LinkedIn contacts. You're welcome to link up after the webinar. I could see from the list that there are so many super interesting people from all around the world that are joining in. And well, right now we're almost 50 people. So really nice that there has been such an interest for this webinar. And also from when you guys signed up, I could see that a lot of you might not know Master. So just so you know the context that I am speaking from, I just want to give you some headers of who we are here at Master International. And who we are also represents our interest in this subject of diversity. Our purpose, our main purpose, is to create equality and give more people and companies a chance to grow and perform. And we do that by developing assessment tools. We have personality tests and cognitive tests. And one of the main focus points in the psychology department is focusing on how to create these tools that do not discriminate, that can eliminate bias. And as you can see from the little map, this is the map that I've shown here is just for one of our solutions, Opto, where we try to map out which countries we are represented in. And the darker blue is where we have test takers saying that they live or they feel a connection to that country. So as you can see, we're represented all around the world, and that gives an extra focus on the bias that can happen when you do testing. And I think that is our main focus point when we develop tests. Apart from tests being valid and reliable, we also have a huge focus on creating non-biased tests. And the last element that we implemented was that we had all of our reports going through a quality check to remove everything that had to do with gender. So now we're talking about persons instead of he or she, which is quite a nice achievement for us, as we know that there are other people who don't associate with the he/she term, for example. And also a way to say that what we're interested in is measuring people, not their gender or their age, for example. But again, we have this palette of solutions, of cognitive and personality tools that we work with, and our main focus is creating tools, not only developing but also maintaining them over time, so they are always up to date with whatever is moving in society. And a huge thing right now is this subject about diversity. So let's try to go on. Just to set the scene, I've taken this question. I've read the latest article in Fortune about their Fortune 500 companies. And this question is, how many companies do you think have female CEOs in 2022? So last year when they did the last count. And every dot on the screen represents a Fortune 500 company. And as you might think, it's not very many. So we have this very little portion. It's I think it's 10.4% that actually have a female CEO. The positive news is that last year it was the year before in 2021 it was 7.8, and the year before it was down around 6%. So again, there is a positive movement, but we're moving quite slowly. But we see this expanding focus on creating diversity, and gender is of course just one of the topics. So I would like to start off by introducing a poll, just to see how much this subject is in focus with you guys who are participating today. So you should see on your screen. To what extent do you work with diversity? You can say I work actively with diversity every day, actively on a regular basis, but not every day, actively with diversity for a limited time on special projects, actively with diversity rarely and only on occasions. I think of diversity regularly, but does not work. I work extremely little with it, or I do not actively work diversity. So try and type in on your screen. You should be able to do it now. If you go into the chat, I can see that Jane is asking, do you see the question? It should come up on your screen or in the chat and you can respond. I can see that we have over 40 responses, so I'm guessing that the majority of people can see it. Okay, so there's a focus on diversity with you guys. That's probably also why you're here today. Very nice to see. We have 13% is actively working, 30% actively, but not on a daily basis. So that's over 40%, which is extremely nice. And only 4% does not actively work with diversity. Very interesting to see. So let me see if I can close the poll. Let me close it off. This is also reflected in some of the research we see on the area. I'll start up in the upper right corner. Post on LinkedIn about diversity received 1.9 times the engagement of other posts in 2020. And this is an article from LinkedIn, which tells us that there are some elements in society today that where we get pulled towards stuff dealing with diversity. Employers that posted about diversity saw 26% more applications from women than employers who posted less. So this is why it's so important. Not only is there a lot more engagement, but we also see that it can have a direct effect, in this case, on the applications that companies receive. 76% of employees and job seekers said diversity was important when considering job offers. And 45% of learning and development professionals plan to implement diversity programs in 2022. which is also a rise from the year before. And the rest of it is from a McKinsey article, and I have all the references if some of you guys would like it. So it's about putting it on the agenda, but that's not enough. We need to do something. And I've also taken this quote, leaders must acknowledge that increasing demographic diversity does not by itself increase effectiveness. What matters is how an organization harnesses diversity and whether it's willing to reshape its power structures. So there's something about being aware of it and knowing how to act with it, but also knowing how to change ourselves as a company. And this leads me over to just some definitions before I go into the actual how. So diversity, very roughly and squarely put, we can say diversity is the who. Diversity is what we can see. It's something we can measure. We can go in and we can look at a team, how many, what is the gender ratio, what is the age, how are the differences in a team, and we can create diverse teams just by including other people that are different than what are in the team at the moment. But the interesting part is the inclusion part. The inclusion part is the how. It's important that people they feel a part of the team, and that is a subject feeling. That is not something that we can just put a tick at and say, okay, now we've done it. Now we have created inclusion, and in that context, I've borrowed some words from social science about integration and assimilation, and I think here integration is when you have a minority that gets integrated into the majority. It means that both the minority and the majority, they change and they adapt. Assimilation is when the minority is assimilated into the majority, and it's only the minority that has to adapt to be like the majority. So I think when we talk about inclusion in this context, it's super interesting to see how we can integrate people into our culture, into our organization. It's not about just finding the right fit for our culture, but knowing how our culture will change and how our culture will adapt when we have people coming in that are different from what we have at the moment. And equity is the why. We do it because it's fair. We want to create fairness for all people. And it's also good for our business. Again, there are several research articles talking about especially innovation, but also talking about how diverse teams actually is more profitable for a company. And in this sense, when we talk about equity, it's important to have this nuance between equity and equality. I'm pretty sure a lot of you know these small drawings. There are different versions of them, but let me just go through because I think they're quite cute and they give sense to the words in an easy to understand way. So inequality, of course, is where people have unequal access to opportunities. And creating equality is when they, in many senses, get the same tools. But as you see from this example, giving the same tools to many people doesn't necessarily make it an equal ends at the end. And that's where equity comes in. Equity is when we customize the tools. And we look at what are we doing that is creating the inequality. So maybe one ladder has to be higher than the other. But the last one is the most important, that we need to be aware that we might want to or need to fix something in the system that is creating the inequality in the first place. So it's not only about the tools. It's not just about supporting supporting employees who might not have the same access as others. If we can fix the system, so with the same tools, we create equality, equity, then there's a sense of justice. And I think this idea of it's not just about the tools, it's also about the system is really important to have in mind. And this leads me to the next, which is about the goals of a diversity agenda. I have worked with companies that have a diversity agenda where they focus very much on the diversity element. So the goal is to hire 55 plus candidates, meaning candidates that are older than 55. It could also be the goal is to hire more women, or the goal is to whatever. I mean, talking about this specific group that we want to have more of. But in my mind, that can lead to counter-discriminating, because it's not about hiring more 55 candidates here. The goal is to eliminate age bias in this context. It could be a recruitment strategy, or eliminating gender bias, because we know that there must be an age bias, there must be a gender bias when we look at the how a lot of teams or how a lot of companies, their employers, they look. So try and have the focus on the focus in the longer run, and not just about we want to hire more women or hire more 55 plus candidates. That's at least my focus in this webinar. Talking about diversity without doing this, I call it counter-discriminating towards other groups. And this is because I have seen that initiatives that have the best of intentions, they can result in unintended discrimination towards the rest. I mean, if we look at the tree again from before, it's about not tilting the tree to the other side. So the important task is qualifying ideas of diversity so they do not unintentionally counter-discriminate. This also means that I will come with some very practical examples that hopefully you can take home with you, and you can convert, and you can make them your own. And in that, I just need to be absolutely sure that you guys know that I'm a psychologist. I am not legal in any way, and I know that discrimination laws, they vary a lot. We have a lot of policies here in Denmark. We have a lot of laws, and they are different just going to Sweden or going to the US. So have that in mind, that in your countries or in your regions, there are laws and regulations that you, of course, have to have in mind when implementing policies on this area. So let's jump into the practical examples. So my first example here is looking at your policies. When I worked as an internal HR, a huge part of my work was creating policies, maternity policies, vacation policies, smoking policies, employee handbooks. And if I look back at what we had developed at that time, there's no doubt about it that it was written from our cultural perspective. not just cultural, but I mean cultural in an ethnical sense, but also in a company sense. And I think that looking at the policies and creating them so they appeal to diverse employees and not just the majority could really benefit a company. Policies should reflect the lifestyle of different people and not the employer. I mean, again, the talking about the organizational culture. And when you do this, when you have these policies that are different, then remember also to use them when you're branding the company. This is super important when you're on job fairs or when you have employer branding, that you remember that this, I mean, not a lot of companies do this. And one very concrete example is to do flexible holidays. Instead of saying, our company closes from the 20th of December and opens again on the 2nd of January because that is where people have Christmas vacation. Then you eliminate the people that do not have Christmas at home. They might enjoy the holiday of Eid instead. Or are not religious at all and might just want to work. They don't have kids that go to school, so they prefer working and then having a longer summer holiday. So it's not only about the ethnic culture here when we're talking about vacation and holidays, but also the lifestyle of different people. Another policy that I've worked with is the maternity paternity policy, and I think at least here in Denmark there's a real wave towards looking at those and writing them in a way that reflects these other family combinations. So a paternity policy could also be a co-moms policy. We have people adopting. We have people. Constellation of families that are very different from just mom, dad, and 2 kids. So having that in mind when we do the policies, and again using them as a branding in the company, in my opinion, is a really, really nice way to start. My next example here is where we find candidates. When we source for candidates, we have our usual places that we use. LinkedIn, of course, job fairs, graduation programs, referrals, job ads. I don't know if people still use job ads in the newspaper, but at least job ads on web pages. But try and think about new places where you can source candidates, because again, when we have one way of attracting candidates into our company or making them interested in our company, if we stay to the same way of doing it, of course we get the same type of candidates. And working with organizations that use a lot of volunteer work, I also connect with people that might be outside the job market, and they would like to come into the job market, and they don't know how to do that, but they're volunteering because they do have the resources, and they do have the abilities to do a lot of the work that could also be done in a company. So it could be volunteering around a huge fair. So taking those people, those would be great at doing project work, or when you're at job fairs, that they can arrange that together with the company. So it's just about going out into the world and looking in places where we're not normally seeing or wouldn't normally go looking. I've also read your morning read. I use my mornings. I go through the news. I go through LinkedIn, and I read a lot of really interesting pieces. And a lot of times I get inspired in my work by reading somebody doing something completely different. It could be in the biotech business that they have done something, and that really inspires me to go in and look at something at my work. So just have an open mind. Again, that when you're sourcing, when you're looking for candidates, they might not be in the place where you normally find them, and being open to doing the connections between what your job is, like very traditional, and where can we find those competencies in other places. And then I've written here, associate actively with CSR organizations. There are so many organizations that work with senior employees, or employees with disabilities, or people, refugees, or organizations that help these people who really have a hard time being a part of our job market. And at least here in Denmark, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but here in Denmark, we're seeing a scarcity in candidates. So it's difficult to find candidates, and I really think that this is the time that we open up to some of these groups of people that have difficulties getting into the labor market. And that's a benefit for us, because we do become more diverse when we can integrate these people into our teams, into our organizations, into our culture. I didn't say it before, I think. If you have any questions, please write them down. I can't follow if there's questions coming in. But I will look at the questions at the end, and I have time to answer them. So please write in either the chat or the Q&A. Perfect. When we write job advertisements, a lot of times we have this mission statement, or this part at the end where we can flash our inclusiveness. And preparing for this webinar, I just wanted to see if that was the case still. Is this still a thing that is being used? And it is. As you can see here, these are two examples. I've translated them from Danish into English, but these are from actual job advertisements that I found online. And my issue with some of these mission statements is that again, the intention of being inclusive, we accidentally exclude others. So the first one here in light gray, our mission is to create diverse teams. Excellent. Perfect. And we therefore encourage people over 40, people with handicap, and women to apply for the job. So what if I'm not in any of those groups? And what if this company also has an issue with diversity in, for example, ethnicity? They're not mentioning that here. So again, once you start mentioning very specific elements then you automatically exclude others. So there's a one that's a little bit better. We encourage everyone to apply for the position regardless of gender, age, ethnic background, disability, etc. So this is a little bit better. But again, it doesn't say anything about why or what the company does if I come in and I'm a part of a minority. So let me just, this is my example of a diverse mission statement that you could include in a job advertisement. We believe in encouraging inclusion, acceptance, and understanding by employing individuals who bring unique perspectives to the company. Because that, in my opinion, that is what it's all about. It's not about only having the diversity if you don't have the inclusion and you don't have the equity. So it's about how can you bring whatever the people they come with, this uniqueness, and we all have it. I mean, even though we're part of the majority, we also have a uniqueness that is really important and can play into the diversity. So have a look if you are using some of these sentences in your job advertisement. Again, remember that there might be some legal bindings to what you put in your job ads in some countries. But then you might be able to complement the legal stuff with something that is a little bit more soft and also states how you work with the diversity and inclusion in your company. So this is a real fun one. The research here is getting older, is from 2011, but is still extremely valid. The research showed us in 2011 that a lot of the words that we use when we write, it could be a job ad, it could be the website, it could be our training material, it could be our internal communication. They're keyed to appeal to one gender over another, and were only concentrated in male versus female. So that is what this research is about. So when you use words that are very masculine, it could be action or power, compared to words that are more feminine, like care, support, then you automatically appeal to people who are more masculine or more feminine by nature. And being aware of this can help you to change the language you use. Again, it could also be in the training material that you use internally. It could be on your website. If you want to appeal more broadly. And they found out also that what does it mean that some words appeal more to one gender over another? That meant that just by changing the language, not the meaning, but the language, they actually could get more applicants of another gender. So they could neutralize the language, so they were both key to male and female equally. And this is so interesting because sometimes when we have, especially in recruiting, when we have a pool of candidates and we say, why are we having 75% more females than men applying for this job? That is so strange. It could be that we have written a job advertisement keyed toward the more feminine energies. And not only was this research released, and we here at Master International, we made list over the different words, so it's really easy to see. But others have developed this, they call it a gender decoder. I have the link here. Just copy paste the text in, and it comes out with your gender ratio in your text. So super interesting to see if what you think is neutral actually also is, by pulling it through this gender decode. And then you can choose to use it if you want to attract more men. That could be in a daycare institution, where I know, at least here, a lot of daycares, they have difficulties attracting male. There's not a lot of males applying for the jobs. Then maybe just by changing the language, they can appeal to more masculine applicants. What this, of course, does not take into account is age and culturally loaded words and so on. So there's a lot of more aspects that you could go into, and you could look into when you look at how you write and what language you use. And I'm pretty sure that that you will have a culture of your language in your organization, that I mean, there's a good chance that it's not neutral. So, and this gender decoder is free of charge, so anybody can just copy paste text into it and see what it comes up with. Then I have this example of looking at other areas, and when we do screening, we are many times, it's easy for us to be biased. So we look at candidates and we have to screen them out, and we are sitting there with their CVs and their applications. And especially, we know that especially if there's a photo on the CV, that plays into the bias in the screening process. So my mother-in-law, she plays the violin in orchestras, and she talked about this blinded screening that they do, or have done now since the 70s in big orchestras. And I tried to find some research on it because I thought that was super interesting to look at, and what it means by doing blinded screening. So before the 70s, as you can see in the first one, the proportion of females in the biggest 5 orchestras in the U.S. were extremely low. I mean, under 10%. So if you had 100 people in an orchestra, only 10 of them or less, and some of them a lot less, some of them 0% would be females. And what happens when you want to be a part of one of these very large orchestras? There are orchestral auditions. And the orchestral auditions is that there's a stage, and you come up as a musician and you play your instrument in front of an assessment group that mainly consists of men at this time, because it was mainly men in this area. So in the 70s, they introduced this blinded screening. So on the screen, they pulled the curtains and put the musician behind the curtains to play the instrument. So now the group that were to assess all these candidates could not see if it was a female. They could not see if it was a colored person, and they could only hear the music. And that should be the important part of being in an orchestra, is your abilities to play music. So they introduced this, and as you can see from the charts here, it has really gone up. So there has been something. Those biases, they were present before the 70s, before they introduced this blinded screening. And what I think is extremely interesting is to look at how can we use this blinded screening in other areas other than orchestras. So, of course, coming from a company that creates test tools, a test could be a perfect way of doing this blinded screening. So you give the same test to all people, they take it, and then you choose without looking at what their names are, without looking what their genders are, without looking at their age. You have a very equal way of screening the candidates. It could also be in other areas. I know that a lot of talent management systems, recruitment systems, they also have this ability where you plot in objective criterias, and you can then select candidates or screen candidates based on that. So you're absolutely sure that they live up to a specific criteria before you go on in the process. Of course, there's a downside by this that I think is also really interesting to have in mind. And that is we might want an orchestra in this context that resembles a community. So if we have an orchestra, again, this is from the US, so let's say that we have an orchestra that we would like to resemble an area in New York that is prominently consisted of Black people, then that automatically becomes a criteria that is, in my opinion, valid to put in there. If we want an orchestra that consists of children, then of course we have to put the age in there because there's an aim or a goal with creating a team, or in this case an orchestra that resembles a specific group. So I mean, this is not just always the best way to do things. We need to understand also what happens when we do the blinded screening. Then there are some elements that we can't uphold. But again, if when I'm sitting in a company and my only aim is to hire the best possible back-end developer, then I don't care about race, color, age, gender, sexuality, lifestyle. Then I care about one thing, and that is how the person will perform at his job or her job. And their blinded screening would definitely make sense. So again, all has to do with context. Oh, I have a couple of more for you guys. So we plan onboarding. Hopefully, we plan onboarding for our new employees when they come into. And this is also in a lot of companies a huge task for HR. But what I see when I look at how others they plan the onboarding, they look at how they would like to be on board themselves, instead of looking at this other person or this other person's profile. And we need to remember that the way we learn is super individual. How we learn is all comes down to who we are. I mean, the personality and how we're wired up here. So thinking about this person, what would be best for this person? Would it be peer-to-peer learning, sitting beside a colleague, or would it be reading a lot of theoretical articles? Um, that should come from looking at the person that should be onboarded. And this sounds so obvious when I'm saying it, but I still see that leaders creating an onboarding plan, they think about how they did the last time or how they done the 100 last times, and normally also look at how they would uh, themselves like to be onboarded. And a really good way of knowing how to onboard a person, as I said, is to know the employee's potential for learning, and we can test that, and we can look at that by giving them a cognitive test, which we would also give them in a recruitment process. So here my aim is to say, when we use the cognitive test in the recruitment, let's not just forget about it when we've employed the person, and let's use those tests, also the personality test, when we do the onboarding, and when we help the leader afterwards of creating a 3-month plan for this new person. Let's look at how quickly we expect them to learn, the way that they learn. That's a cognitive test. Their preferences, their level of social interactions, their curiosity, what kinds of tasks should we give them. And we can see that by looking at their personality profile. So what does this have to do with diversity? This is, again, looking at people that are different from ourselves. We need to understand that a person coming into our company is not just a piece in a puzzle. The puzzle also has to change, and that's one of my mantras today, right? So we need, the organization can't just have an onboarding plan that we copy paste every time we have a new employee. We need to change to be able to welcome and to integrate any person that starts in our company. So the last recommendation or idea or a way to work with diversity is looking at how you structure your work schedules at your organizations. So I've written here, not all work best in an office from 9 to 5, and we know that being flexible creates more trust, loyalty, well-being in our employees. And a concrete example of that is looking at, do we have a head count? And that, I mean, do we have one position that might benefit from being 2 or 3 people in the same position? So dividing it into 15 hours job position. We know that there are people with disabilities who have a hard time, and that can both be mental or physical disabilities that really have a hard time fitting in to our the way that the job market has been created. So loosening up a little bit from what we see as the fixed way of doing of having a position. And what I've experienced as well is that it doesn't just help, I've written here, disabilities have a higher chance of thriving, but it's really contagious, because when you're at a company where you can see that there are room for people who, again, might not fit the cookie cutter mold, then that makes me want to be in that company, because if anything happens to me, I know that there's still a place for me. I know that the workplace is flexible and would want to benefit from what I can I can give to the company, even though it might not be 37 or 40 hours a week. And then there will be more people at the work parties, the office parties, or the Friday bar at the end. So that's not a bad thing either. I think it's also about creating an environment. That's the last point I have on this slide. Encourage community and engagement when we're at the workplace, and then creating this area, or having respect that people who need to immerse themselves in the job and they need to close themselves into this spell might actually do that better at home. So when we're at work and we interact with each other, the company can support that by different initiatives. But also remember that not all of us are extroverts and think that it's ever so great that people are talking around all the time. A lot of people also need to be in their bubble. So this is not only about disability, it's also about personality. It's also about having room for different ways of working. Yeah. So before we go over to the questions, I have like one paradox that I think is super difficult to navigate in. So I have here on one side, we really want to focus on non-bias selection, for example. So being diverse, supporting equity, integration on one side. And then on the other side, not wanting to be biased. So, and I put it up in a question: how can we ensure more female leaders if we cannot ask for a candidate's gender? And I think that is one of the paradoxes that we haven't landed yet. In many countries, sorry, we cannot ask about people's age. We cannot ask about people's gender in a recruitment process. We cannot ask about their ethnicity. But how do we know then that we attract the right people? How do we know that we are not biased if we can't measure it? So there's this paradox between not wanting to be biased and therefore not measuring, not registering, not documenting a lot of these demographical questions. And then on the other side, a really strong focus on we need to be diverse. I think I haven't found the solution yet. And this is one of the things that is really important to me and here at Master in the work that we do. I mean, how can we map out all of employees and be aware of unconscious bias and make sure that we do the right thing if we can't register it? If any of you have the answer to that, then please send me an email afterwards, because that is something that is super relevant for us and just is on our mind at the moment. And this is an example of some of the challenges that we meet when we want to work with diversity and we want to work with equity. And this is definitely not an area that has ended or saying like, okay, so this is the way to do it. Now we fixed it. I think we're very much still in the start. We've just planted a seed, and we're trying to make the seed grow. And hopefully this will not be a subject for a webinar for this many people in 10 years. I mean, hopefully in 10 years, this will just be a normal, integrated way of thinking, of doing, of acting in our organizations. Yeah. So I will try to see if I can find any questions. Again, please write your questions or your remarks in the comments or the Q&A. Let's see if I can find any. Okay, so I'll just start from the top here. How to best work with diversity recruitment, but still wanting to hire the strongest candidate does not always go hand in hand, because there is, in some job areas, a majority of males or females represented. And I totally agree. I think, and this is also some of the things that I try to mention in the example of using the correct language, the gendered language, that we can also use it proactively if we want to, if we know that we have attracted a certain amount of candidates, a certain amount of specific gender in our candidate pool, we can try and turn those knobs of the language that we use. But again, I also think it's connected to the policies that we have. We know that what is more prominent for female applicants are the more softer. It's not 100%, it's not always, but there's a tendency towards the more softer elements that female applicants they look for compared to male applicants. So it's about employer branding. What do we show out there? What does the company actively do to appeal to certain genders? If it's about the genders, and I think for me, it's not about employing a woman over a man. I totally agree with you. It's about employing the strongest candidates always. That's at least where I come from. But I must say, what we have done up to now is not employing the strongest candidate. So it's also about acknowledging that what we have done up to now is biased, is discriminating, and we have to do something else. So my answer to that would be, as I've mentioned here, look at your policies. Look at the language you use on your webpage, on your job ads, because that can really make a difference. And again, if not, then just for fun, try and put some of the text you have through this gender decoder. It can be, you can have an awakening when you do that. It really is a fun task. I'll go to the next. How about looking at the circumstances around the role and the ability to function well, which appeals to both male, female, and other genders? Then hopefully all genders will apply. Exactly. So the goal should be that anybody applies for a job, that it's not mainly one gender, if we're talking about gender again. It's about having everybody applying for the jobs. And I think the circumstances is also how we organize the job, how we organize a task in an everyday situation. I mean, do we have room for people going home to pick up their kids? I don't care what gender you have, but do you have room for doing that? Do we look negatively at working from home? And I'm pretty sure if we made a poll, all companies would say working from home We do that. That's perfect. And then yet when you come in as an organizational psychologist, you can hear the way people talk about, oh, she's working from home again. I mean, I won't invite him to the meeting because he's working from home. And that is not okay. So it's not only about our intention, it's also about what we do and what our actions are at the workplace. And I think if that's what you mean with circumstances, I completely agree. And we just need to acknowledge that we do. I mean, I also talk from my cultural perspective. If I lived in another ethnical culture, this talk would definitely be different. If I was a different personality profile, this talk will definitely be different. So it's about, and that's one of the first slides, about harnessing that diversity. What is it that this person from this culture with this gender, what can that person bring to the table? That is what is interesting. So I'll go to the next comment. This goes back to the government's decisions regarding student selections to the universities as well. Exactly. When students are chosen based on their grades, women are overrepresented in the long run. The amount of male students will go down in some fields particularly, and in some fields there are difficulties to get female students. It is not just how companies hire. The question is much broader and goes deeper. I completely agree. I read a research article from the Copenhagen University. I also linked it, or I wrote a small post on it on LinkedIn, so you can go in and find it. Copenhagen University looked at how students were doing during their education, and also afterwards, who were picked for the PhD programs, who were picked for being associate professors. And actually, when we look at university levels, a lot of the students today in Copenhagen universities that are doing well, the talents, are the male students that are very extroverted. So this would be the self-confident male student that just puts out ideas and talks and raises their hands. And some of the more quieter students, and in that is also, again, that could be a cultural thing, a lot of the female students, they get overlooked. So it's not that they get higher grades. I mean, it's not that the males get higher grades than the female students. They actually looked at students receiving the same grades. So objectively speaking, they are at the same level. Yet it was a lot of the male students who were offered the positions at universities as associate professors or associate helpers for the professors and PhDs. And the thought behind this is that when we look at the constellation, the gender constellation in universities, there's a major overrepresentation of male professors. So they are looking for, and this is unconsciously, I mean, I don't think there's any intention of discriminating, but unintentionally, they are looking at people that resemble themselves. They are looking for people who are, again, extroverts and out there and have the ability to just throw out ideas, even though they might be good ideas or bad ideas. And then they overlook the other group who are the more quieter, but are equally capable and equally talented in the field. That is super interesting. And I think we see the same, but the reverse. in our lower schools, where it definitely is in our public schools. They are their foundation is based on more female values. A lot of teachers in our public schools are women. It's more about being quiet, sitting down, and that means that if you live up to that standard, you are considered a bigger talent than the other students, which are mainly boys who have a hard time sitting down, and that's super interesting. I mean, the way that we construct our education system is also towards this female energy or male energy, and I think we just the first step. That's maybe because I'm a psychologist. The first step is to be conscious about what's happening, conscious about the cultures that we have in our educational system, and seeing how that then reflects going on. And you're completely right when saying that we also have fields where one gender is overrepresented. I think in midwives here in Denmark last year, I think there was 0% male students. That's a huge, I mean, I think that's an issue. And of course, we can see the biotech industry that has really set into attracting more female students. They're doing programs down to my youngest daughter, who, when she was in, I think it was 4th grade, she was invited into a technology workshop, and that was to introduce to the girls already from kids about this area of science that is also super interesting, and they might not be introduced to in another way, because I certainly wasn't introduced to it when I was a kid. It didn't even cross my mind that could be a way for my kids to go before she came home and talked about this workshop and found it super interesting. So we as parents are also a part of this. So definitely, it's an issue in society. It's an individual issue that we need to work with. My webinar today was to see how can we do it from an organizational perspective, and what tools do we have, and what ideas could I bring to the table that might inspire you guys to take something home and implement in your work. Cool. So the last question that just came in: will we receive the presentation afterwards? Yes, you will receive the presentation. I'll send it to all of you. If you don't want it, then just erase it and delete it from your email box. We had over 100 people signing up for the for this webinar, which just was really overwhelming. So everybody will just get it afterwards, and I'll see if I can get some technical help of putting the recording, also making it public in, I don't know, someplace. So if you have colleagues, or if you need to see anything that inspired you, then it's out there. I'll see if I can manage that. Perfect. Any other questions? Nope. Cool. Then I would like to say thank you very much for attending. It has been super interesting to diving into this subject, preparing for the webinar, even more that we do in our everyday. Again, you're more than welcome to link up with me on LinkedIn or follow me, write an email, look at our webpage. Yeah, I'm here, and thank you.